have a couple that are in queue there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim and Tim.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out this morning. We're having a bit of a challenge finding startups that maybe don't want to get up at 9 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever time they have to. So I invited Tim to join us today, maybe as a magnet to draw out some startups that we can get to present. I don't think this will be a challenge after today, but I certainly wanted to deliver some valuable content. And the hottest topic in entrepreneurship is always raising capital. So I'm Jim Roberts. I have started 5 entrepreneur ecosystems within North Carolina, from Charlotte to Asheville, here in Durham, and 2 in Wilmington. I also run an angel investor network in Wilmington called WHALE, the Wilmington Angels for Local Entrepreneurs. And Tim and David Gardner of Cofounders Capital have really been the most active out-of-town investors that are willing to make the trip. David likes to make the trip because he has a house on Figure 8 Island out near Wilmington. But Tim has been gracious enough to speak a couple times, as well as he will be moderating a very important event in Wilmington in July. One of my mentors is a guy named Tom Fisher. Tom Fisher has been the CIO or CTO of eBay, Gateway, Qualcomm, SuccessFactors, and Oracle. And he will be one of our speakers in July that Tim will be moderating. If I can introduce Tim a little bit, Tim and I have known each other through the ecosystem. I like to rib Tim a little bit because he played hockey at Harvard. So in my tweet yesterday, I called him Timmy McHockey, which I didn't get a response about, so I'm not sure if I'm in the doghouse here or not. Tim was then smart enough to come down to North Carolina and go get his M.B.A. in entrepreneurship at UNC Chapel Hill. Tim and I first met when he was at NC Idea, but he has also been part of Idea Fund Partners. He is now part of Cofounders Capital, which is a very successful venture capital firm started by David Gardner, who has had his own entrepreneur success and used a lot of his own money on angel and venture capital investing. They also have a building in Cary that is, I believe, donated by the city of Cary for you guys to kind of incubate some local entrepreneurs. Whether or not you have investment in those companies, the startups are able to use the space.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I know why you guys are here is to hear about how entrepreneurs and startups can get more venture capital. So you guys just raised a brand new $31 million fund. Can you talk about your focus within that fund and where the entrepreneurs can approach you about how to get some of that capital?
Sure. Hey everybody, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. One thing I want to add on to what Jim said is, after Harvard, I came back to North Carolina. So I grew up here, I'm from here, my family's here, we're planning on raising my kid and family here. And so everything Jim's done for the ecosystem and all these different groups kind of mean a lot more to me just because this is the area I'm from. This is the area I know I want to help grow and stay in. So over the last 14 months, my partner David Gardner and I have been raising a fund, and I wrote an article for Grepbeat at some point last year when we were in the middle of the fundraising, talking about how VCs feel the pain of entrepreneurs, right? We have to raise capital, that money comes from somewhere. And we were looking over the past 14 months that Dave and I have had over 500 first meetings with people. That's first meetings with individuals or groups to try to raise capital. So you look at your second meetings, third meetings, fourth meetings with those groups before they write a check. You're well over 1,000 meetings over the last year trying to raise capital. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of no's, that's a lot of too earlys, that's a lot of you're too late, that's a lot of you're not in my wheelhouse, not in my geography, and you guys as entrepreneurs have heard all of those things as you're raising capital, as you're trying to raise capital. Don't take it personally, right? It's something that investors have a certain thesis that you have to find the ones that match your thesis. So with that said, now I'm going to go into Cofounders Capital. Cofounders Capital, we're focused on very early stage, seed stage, B2B software companies. Now, seed stage, early stage, that's all relative to where you are, right? When we say that, we're talking about companies that are pre-revenue or maybe just at revenue. Maybe they got a couple beta customers, something like that, but very early on. We like working with entrepreneurs when they just have an idea, maybe a little bit of technology, and help kind of form that idea in their go-to-market and the technology that they have. We typically write checks of $400,000 to $600,000 in that range, our first checks. And we've been investing. I'll tell you a little bit about the shift in our fund focus.
This is fund 2.
This is fund 2, yeah. So in fund one we were investing at it for the last 4 years. It's a $12 million fund. And what we would do is we would write checks of $300K or $400K into a company. They'd get to $500K or $1 million in annual recurring revenue. And then they'd have to go out and try to raise capital from other areas around the country. Other investors here locally, but also around the country. And people wouldn't write a check into a company that small. And we didn't have enough capital to continue funding growth, fueling growth for that company. So what we did with Fund 2 is the same exact thesis, 400K, maybe 600K checks early on, but then we're reserving 2 to 3 times that amount to help those companies keep growing fast so they don't have to slow down and go out and try to raise capital. Right? We have meaningful money we can put in to follow that on. So B2B software, very early stage, seed stage, writing checks in that 400 to 600K range. It all depends on really what the model is, what the company needs. We'll go a little more, a little less. But that's kind of the thesis of the fund.
So you're really talking about you invest at the angel level, but it's really a venture fund. So if you're saying really at the idea stage, that's normally where the angels play.
Yeah, I know some of you are members of angel groups, and we syndicate a lot of deals with angel groups. There's a shift in the market here. Angel groups are acting more like VCs. VCs are acting more like growth equity, right? Growth equity is acting more like private equity, right? And what I mean is everybody's shifting up the continuum. So it's becoming harder and harder to find somebody that'll write an early stage check into a company, or a seed stage pre-revenue check. And sometimes it's friends and family money, but then there's not a lot of people playing in that space as there's a shifting continuum. So when I say we are very early on, if you have an idea, maybe a little bit of tech, like start talking to us. That doesn't mean you're going to get the check now, right? But it's a good idea to start having those conversations so that when the capital can be useful, we're there to put it in.
So my list of I have 4 pages of questions front and back. I'm just kidding. But they're not in any particular order, so we'll fly around a little bit.
Sure.
So I know you're smart enough to handle all these questions.
We'll see.
So I'll ask the question maybe one way, maybe you'll take it another, but what are the steps for entrepreneurs to get on the radar of investors? And I'll give you maybe 3 ways, and then you can say none of those really matter, it's this way. So in a priority, would you put, a pitch contest when they're on stage with maybe 5 to 7 to 10 other entrepreneurs, a referral from a trusted source, or press coverage?
A referral from a trusted source is always going to be number 1. If I get an email from somebody that I trust in the community, somebody that, an investor in our fund maybe, another investor somewhere else in the community, I am always going to follow up with that company, always. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to want to run into that investor, co-investor, whatever it is, at a function like this, and they say, hey, remember I made that introduction and you never followed up? I'm always going to follow up with that person. A pitch competition, I'm extremely active in the community, so I'm at most things. I've probably seen a lot of you at a lot of different events, but I'm at all the universities, the pitch competitions, I'm on the NCID and CV selection committees. So if you're making your way through that, I'm going to see it and I'm probably going to reach out to you directly. Press coverage.
Would you
Yeah.
reach out before the pitch competition where you see a list of
No.
presenting companies? You wouldn't not reach out, but probably research them online before you actually appear at the event. Like if you saw a list maybe a week in advance of who's presenting.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make the decision on whether I'm going to go to that event based on the companies that are there.
Yeah.
So there's 7 companies presenting in Wilmington.
Yeah.
You know, my time is valuable. I think everybody has to value their time. That's all you really have. And I'm not going to go to Wilmington to see 7 companies that are in manufacturing because I don't do that, right? So, so I am going to look at the companies. If there's a couple that pique my interest, I'm going to know that they're there and be ready to hear them talk. And then last, I would say, is press coverage. If a company's getting press coverage and I haven't heard about them by that point, I'm probably not doing my job.
Yeah.
And I like to think I do my job, so yeah.
So one thing that you didn't list that I'm not trying to is maybe a referral from a lawyer or an accountant. I mean, the certain like a Fred Hutchison. Really, for those of you who don't know, Fred Hutchison is probably the premier startup law firm in this area. He has donated over $1 million of Hutchison Law Group dollars to the startup ecosystem in the South over the last 30 years. So if you get a referral from a Fred or a Merrill Mason or a Brooks Malone, can you talk, because I think that is the most underutilized way to get the attention of the investor is, okay, Fred's representing you, he's done his due diligence, it's probably gonna have some traction.
Yeah, and I've gotten referrals from all of those people that you just listed, and that I would say that I would consider them trusted members of the community that I would definitely reach back out to. And if I just said, hey, I'm not going to meet with this group because I don't think I can provide value, or we're definitely not going to invest because it's not in our wheelhouse, those people are professionals and they don't take any offense to that, and they should save their entrepreneur's time, right? And say, hey, not a fit, I reached out, you know, here's some people that make sense to talk to. So I'll be straightforward with those guys and say, yes, I love the meeting, thank you, or no, not in our wheelhouse, but thank you for thinking of us, and go from there.
So here's a tougher question is,
Well, let me just so in this community, one thing that we have going for us in this community is everybody really does work together, okay? I was talking, you know, people are like, oh, your competition or other venture groups. No, we need more capital here. We need more help here. I talk to Bull City and Idea Fund and all the angel groups. Every week I'm on the phone with all those guys. I talked to an angel group and the 2 other venture funds I mentioned this week, right? So we're all working together, and I consider the lawyers and the accountants and everybody in that space to be kind of on the same side, trying to grow the pie here in North Carolina, which is one thing that I think is special about this area.
so I'll follow up on that as you and I meet monthly as part of an angel leader organization. And I think the entrepreneurs don't believe this statement that we all talk. We talk about our deal flow. Hey, Tim is looking at these 3 companies. What do the other angels in the room know about those companies? So can you kind of confirm that?
Yeah, there's everybody talks. Another article that I wrote that you guys can find is how entrepreneurs need to tell a consistent story. Because if I talk to Jim and I say, Jim, here's their traction, they told me they got 30 customers, Jim goes, well, there's no way that's true. I just talked to them yesterday. They got 0. They haven't had $1 of revenue. I'm saying, okay, this is an issue, right? And so we all talk, we all know each other. There is a little bit of groupthink that goes on, I'll say. Because if I do diligence for 2 months on a company and decide not to invest, you know, that immediately kind of goes to the other signals, the other groups. Fair or unfair, it's just the way it is, and you gotta accept it. And so I always pick the brains of the other investors. What do you know? What do you think? And why wouldn't you invest? Why would you? I share my diligence with all of them to make their lives easier. I'm not holding anything back. And I get the permission of the entrepreneurs first, but I always do that. So everyone does talk, and that, for good or bad, I mean, keep that in mind. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a very, very good thing. There are probably 20 times a week I tell somebody, I love this company, this entrepreneur, it's just not a fit for co-founders, but you should really dive into it. So that happens multiple times a day.
So a little bit of a different question is, what are your thoughts on the accelerator process? Because I think we're all aware of an accelerator that didn't, necessarily succeed in this building. Why hasn't that model worked better in this area when, we have a Techstars that's with MetLife, but why isn't there more of that model? It seems like a really good idea, but what's missing from that accelerator model?
So I'm going to answer the question, which was what's wrong with the accelerator model. So I'll take that step at that first. Every business is a unique business. It has a unique set of value props. It has a unique set of ways that it needs to be tested. It has a unique customer base that you need to go. If there was an accelerator, this is what we're trying to have at Cofounders Capital, an accelerator for your specific business. Not a 7-week, week 1, customer discovery, week 2, how we build a product, week 3, go test in the market, all that. We say, no, here's where your company is. This is what your next step is. Go get it done. That is what I think we've been missing. I think because it all seems to be this form fit, here's some money, we take some equity, here's the 7 weeks, everybody sits in a room and we do your individual, we do everybody as a group what you need to work on. And I just don't think that it can waste a lot of entrepreneurs' time. Some folks it's great for, because that's exactly where they are. But a lot of people are way too far along. And I'm a Techstars mentor to the accelerator program, and I noticed that the whole time. I got 2 companies that are in the same program. One is a CEO who's raised 5 rounds of funding for other companies before and knows exactly what they're doing. The next person, this is their very first startup, has no idea what a pre-money valuation is, and they're going through the same program. That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. So you went through the M.B.A. program at UNC Chapel Hill.
Yep.
Were you part of Ted Zoller's program?
I was not.
Okay. So there goes that question.
Well, I can elaborate on it.
Yeah, please.
When I was in business school, I had a company here in North. So I also think being a venture capitalist, it's important to have had some startup experience. I don't think that I can sit across the table from somebody and tell them that they need to reduce their salary, they need to put more personal money into a company, they need to hire, they need to fire, they need to be fired if they're the CEO. I don't think it'd be right to sit on the other side of the table and say those things unless I'd gone through all of them myself. So when I was back in business school, I still had my company which is still in business today. I've been growing that for 8 years, and I still had it when I was in business school and trying to run it. And then at the same time in business school, I was working pretty much full-time with NC Idea and Idea Fund Partners while I was in the full-time M.B.A. program at UNC. So it was all real-life, real-world experience when I was there. So as great as Ted's programs are that are there, I try to go the real-world route.
Okay. If you don't know Ted, please look him up. He's a great asset for North Carolina.
Yep.
So you have invested in a Wilmington company called EasyVote Solutions. Would you mind talking to the crowd about what EasyVote does and maybe 2 of your other portfolio companies so people in the audience can get a sense of what you are investing in?
Sure. I think EasyVote is an interesting situation. So EasyVote's mission statement is they protect the integrity of the election process, which some of you might think is pretty relevant right now. And so what they do is they have different modules that they sell to state, county, city government. Think of one is a inventory management module. So inventory of all your poll machines, where they're going, how they're being transferred. There needs to be a chain of command on all those things. They have a software solution that does all that tracking. That's one thing. They do campaign contributions. So that's another module. So they have all these modules that they sell to the state and city level. EasyVote is a great example of an entrepreneur we tried to help out. David talked to them maybe 3 or 4 years ago about what they were doing, and they got offered a way better deal by an angel investor that was not going to be active in the company, not provide a lot of value, but was going to provide a lot more money on a lot better terms. They came back to us 3 years later. We told them to take the deal. We said, guys, this is a better deal for you. We can help. This deal is so good, you have to take this money. So we lost that deal. They came back to us 3 years later. They said, hey, we have an opportunity for you to buy out this other investor, put a little more working capital in, and that represents a big percentage of the company. So our immediate thought was, okay, well, this company's about to crash and burn. The company was doing $1.5 million in annual recurring revenue, profitable, almost about break even, had never lost a customer, lost 1 or 2 customers for reasons they couldn't control. The company was doing phenomenal. And they came to us because they said, guys, you were good to us in the past. You told us to make the right decision. Basically they offered it up on a silver platter to us to come and take it. And they said, we just want your advice and guidance, and we want you to be part of our team. And so we did that deal, and it's been really good. That's Easy Boat. A couple other companies. We're in a company here locally called Mix. Anybody heard of Mix? Oh, Mix, yeah. So that's one of the companies we have one of our bigger positions in. And I'll tell you a quick story about the entrepreneur. Monica Wood came in and presented to David and I, and she said, I have this app, a recipe app, and basically you tap on a recipe and it prints out your shopping list, or, it had some other functionality right into it, but very limited. She was going to charge consumers a couple bucks a month. And we're like, we're not a B2C investor, this is consumer facing, there are a lot of free substitutions for this. But what if we could find a B2B partner, a grocery retail store, a brand who could buy this? And so Monica said, okay, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to go test that in the market. And she said, if I can go and get a sales call lined up, will you guys go with me? And we said, sure, we'll go with you, Monica. And so she said, okay, and she walked out the door. And David and I literally said to each other, we're never going to see Monica again, because we just blew up her business model, this baby that she'd been working on, and we said, here's what we think the right thing is. 2 weeks later, she calls us and she goes, you guys still willing to go on that sales call? We said, sure. And she said, okay, I got a meeting set up with the CEO of Harris Teeter. You guys ready to go? And we said, Monica, how did you line that meeting up? And she said, I called the secretary every day, sometimes twice a day, and until they gave me 4 minutes with them, and in my 4 minutes, I got that meeting set up. And so we went, we launched the pilot with Harris Teeter, which was really successful. They're doing great now. They're about to jump into their Series A raise, probably about $3 or $4 million, and they work right out of our lab for a couple years now. And that's probably the biggest position we have in one of our portfolio companies. So there's a story of a local entrepreneur.
Good. I'm glad you brought up Monica, because that was a question that I had. So you took out one of those questions.
Sorry.
That's good. So tell me, can you talk to the audience about, we have entrepreneurs in the audience who have applied for NC Idea.
Yeah.
And I have been a judge, and you were an intern, and now you're a judge to decide who gets the grants. And I was blown away by the competition. So I had worked in Durham, I had worked in Wilmington. Our companies applied and applied and applied, and they rarely won. And I thought that there was some regional bias towards the Triangle. And then you're sitting in there as a judge and you're going, oh, wait a minute, there's a 3-time Olympic gold medal winner pitching an idea for anti-concussion software. And you're like, well, that beats the hell out of what I've seen out of Wilmington. No offense to my guys in Wilmington, I love them, but they couldn't compete with that. Can you talk about the competitive level that you saw while you were part of NC Idea and still part of it?
Yeah.
So this is a $50,000 grant, non-dilutive. It's a real asset, and it raises your profile with the investors.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a good source of deal flow for us. So I go through and I look at those and pick out the ones that I want to follow up with. So it's a great source. But so think about the process here. The process is you get a couple pages, maybe 2 pages, answer these quick questions, and you get to submit them to these reviewers. And you have to tell your whole story for your whole life, everything you're working on, into 2 pages, and try to very quickly and easily articulate that to investors. That is investors, decision makers, whatever. That is a very difficult thing to do. Okay, you have to pull yourself out of the weeds and go high level into it. So we would get about 130 to 150 applications a grant cycle, narrow that 150 down to 20 to 25, and then narrow it down to 10 finalists and ultimately 5 or 6 winners. Okay, so those are kind of the stages that you're going through. The competition level obviously increases as you go along, but some people weed themselves out with little things, right? If you don't have the time to put in, proper grammar, right? If you don't have the time to answer one section on the application, if you like that shines through when it gets, and it's so competitive that those little things really make a huge difference. You list a reference that when somebody calls, they're like, I don't really know who that is. I've talked to him one time. That weeds you out. You're out. And it's because it's so competitive. And one of the things that I'd like to see, I've seen, and what I'm really excited about is the competition was really fierce for triangle companies. And now I think the Asheville, Boone, Wilmington, Charlotte, those companies are stepping their game up, and all of a sudden it's not as glaring of a difference in companies that are from the triangle and companies from other parts of the state. Yeah. So that's been really refreshing to us. And I think NC should be commended on their outreach to the other parts of the state, because I think that perception did exist that you have.
Yeah. So I think it's an understatement to say that you guys are hands-on investors, right? I mean, the story of you going with Monica to a sales call is really something you do on the regular now. It's something that you kind of do. Do you do that before you invest? I mean,
so I'll give you an example. I'll talk real world examples right now. We're about to write a $500,000 check to a company that you met the entrepreneurs called Relay One out of Charlotte. In the first 3 weeks of diligence, I went to 8 different hospitals with them. I was on the phone with probably about 5. They sell to hospitals. I was on the phone with probably another 5 to 7 of them. And really, when we jump into diligence, the diligence is trying to help you grow your business, right? How do we line up beta customers? How do we sell a deal, right? We can put money into the technology afterwards if we know that customers want those value props. So I pitch myself as part of the team, and after a couple of weeks, I can go sell that thing almost as well as those salespeople that are going that I'm going with, because I need to understand the value props. I need to understand how to handle the objections. If I'm going to be a value-added investor, I have to be at the ground level with those people trying to sell and experiencing what they're experiencing. Otherwise, I'm giving recommendations from the top down with no visibility into what's going on at the ground level. So, yes, that is, if we can't line up deals and people aren't on their head saying, yeah, we'll buy this, we're not investing. So,
do you think you guys are unique in that you do that, or
yes.
do other funds do that as well?
I think we are unique. Again, we're pre-revenue, so there's no financial history. So how do you de-risk a business with no financial history? You go and talk to customers. That's how you do it. Here's the question. I don't know that our model is perfect in that, because how does our model scale, right? David and I do this right now. We have 21 portfolio companies, and we just raised $31 million to deploy. How long can I keep doing that, or David keep doing that? How many people are we going to need once we get to 30, 34 companies going out and doing sales calls, right? So, and we continue doing that after we make the investment.
Sure. So, if we have limited funds here and limited resources on the funding side of venture capitalists, and the angels are moving later, would you suggest that the startups here travel to go and try to meet the Boston VCs or the Silicon Valley VCs or the Austin, Texas VCs? At what point should they start traveling, or should they be doing that from the beginning to get to know the investor before they actually need the capital of building that rapport with future investors?
Yeah. How many people here are either raising capital, thinking about raising capital? Anybody? Yeah, a couple people. Okay. Raise capital. Okay. There are some limitations here to the area about the types of investment dollars that you can raise. But if you're really struggling raising capital at an early stage here, or in let's say North Carolina in general, traveling around the country I don't think is going to help, and I haven't really seen it work. Now, you might be able to get better terms if you go and try to raise capital from other places. But at the early stage level, you're not going to be successful, I don't think, going around and trying to raise. With a few exceptions, as if there's just nobody that invests in your very specific niche type of business here. Don't start traveling, don't start spending money, don't increase your burn until you know somebody is very, very interested. So they have no problem meeting with you. You're going to fly out on your own dime, right? You're educating them on a new technology, a new space, a new whatever, and they're going to be fine meeting with you, right? But you can de-risk that so much before you go meet in person. My recommendation to entrepreneurs that we don't fund if they're looking for money is find maybe 10, 20 companies that are in your kind of space, right? Startups that have made money and done well before. Look at who their early stage investors were. You can go to Crunchbase, right? Start with a list of 20 companies, then you probably get 40, 50, 60 different early stage investors that invested in those companies, made money in that space before. Then look at who the partners are in those funds, right? Now all of a sudden you have 100 different people. Now add in the founders of those companies that have been in your space before. Now maybe you have a list of 150, 200 people, right? And all of a sudden, you have 200 people that know your space, know your technology, have made money in it before, probably have capital to spend. And if you can't get through to any of those people and get them interested in investing in your company, maybe there's another problem. Yeah. And again, I talked about our fundraising process. It is a numbers game, okay? It is talking to 1,200 people to get 99 investors to come into our venture capital fund, right? It is talking to 75 venture groups to get the 2 that seem to make sense to invest in. Anybody heard of Filter Easy? You guys know Filter Easy? Yeah. Okay. So Filter Easy is one in our portfolio, not B2B software, but that's a longer story. But they are in our portfolio. They're one of the best performing companies here, startup companies here in the Triangle in North Carolina. They are crushing it. I get on the phone with the CEO when he's raising capital, and I say, hey, Pat, how can I help you raise capital? He goes, well, here are the 60 investors I've spoken with. Here are the 22 that had a little level of interest. Here are the 10 that I think have a real shot, and here are the 4 that are in diligence right now. And I'm like, okay, so you got this taken care of. He has it taken care of, okay? And it's that kind of numbers game, and if someone's not going to invest in your company, they're not going to change their fund thesis for you, right? Like, I have investors that I've told how I'm going to deploy capital, and if I deploy it in a different way than what I told them to, they are going to sue me. And I do not want to be sued by them. So find the people that make the right, the right fit.
So I have 2 more questions, and then we'll get to the audience. So my first question is, I think you guys are big believers in that weekly summary from startups to either potential investors or current investors. Is that a strategy that you implement with your portfolios?
Yeah. Well, so do we implement it? We try to, and our entrepreneurs are horrible at investor communications. And it is because they are so busy. I always say the investor updates, like many other things, are important but not urgent. At no time is it like, unless you're running out of capital, you're raising another round, you're like, okay, this is now urgent. You know it's important, but it's not urgent. What we recommend is set a cadence with your investors, whether that be a week, a month. I think a week might be a little bit too much, but a monthly, okay, or every other month or something like that. But give them an update on that time rather than on events. Because if you're only doing it on events, right, then it's either really good news and your investors think everything's going great, or it's really bad news and your investors are like, what the hell? And keep the messaging in those updates consistent so that an investor, either a new potential investor or an old investor, can see what the upticks are. So if I have 4 bullets, and my bullets are monthly recurring revenue is 1, new customers gained is 2, keep those consistent through the updates. And always, always, always ask or put in there how you can help, how the investor can help. What introductions do you need? Because if you've taken money from somebody and you've been asking for help for 2 years and then you run out of capital, right? And you say, I've been asking you every month or every 2 months for help and you never gave it to me, then the investor's like, okay, that's on me, right? So always ask for help.
My last question is, of course, the most important.
Sure.
And as you are the resident hockey expert. Do the Carolina Hurricanes have any chance of winning in the first round against the Capitals?
They have great leadership that has been there and done that before with Brendan Moore and Justin Williams. They got some really young guys that I think are going to get pushed around physically in the playoffs. And so, listen, the success of the Hurricanes drove my old business for 8 years. So I'm a big fan of the Hurricanes, but I think they lose in 6. Unfortunately, that's my prediction. But I will be rooting for them the entire way.
But goalie play is very important in the playoffs.
Goalie play is important. Yeah.
All right, so that was a little bit of fun. How about you guys? Do you guys have some questions for Tim right here?
So can you take us through a first meeting? In other words, the entrepreneur comes in.
Sure.
So a typical first meeting.
Sure. So a typical first meeting, or how I would want a first meeting to go.
Either way.
Okay. So
How to get to yes?
So a typical first meeting, I would say, an entrepreneur, and we're so early stage that this could be, a lot of times it's the first time that entrepreneurs ever talk to an investor. So typically they get in, they start talking about their background a little bit, they start talking about high level, the industry, and they go for about 10 minutes before I have no idea what they did, honestly, is how it typically goes. What I would want it to be is, here's our product, here's the problem, here's the solution, and here are the value props to our customers. 1, 2, 3. If you can explain that, now I know what your business is, and it orients everything else around me. And we can just have discussions from there. Then it comes to, okay, what's your background? How do you know about this problem? How do you find it? What's your traction looking like? All that stuff. How much capital do you need? And coming out of that meeting, there should obviously be clearly defined next steps. And clearly defined next steps shouldn't be for the entrepreneur, how can I get money from you? It should be, how can you make an introduction? It should be something, right? Can you make an introduction for me? Are there customers potential customers that you know that you can introduce me to? Are there next steps I can do for my business that we can have a follow-up meeting to raise capital, right? Something like that. We're never gonna be like, yeah, we're all in on this, because we're gonna want to see how the entrepreneur gets homework done and follows up with us and executes on what we talked about. So don't expect, and it's shocking to me, but a lot of entrepreneurs expect at the end of that first meeting to be like, they're gonna write a check or they're not gonna write a check.
I do the same thing. I give you 3 quick homework assignments, and I want to see how good you are at follow through and follow up before I'm going to put you in front of the angels that are part of my network. Because if I don't like your timing and you're very slow and you're not getting these things done, then you're just not a good fit for what we're trying to do. Yes, Preston.
So talk about filter easy. I think it's very similar to the Monica, that this guy was coachable. These people were coachable.
Yeah.
And I saw one of the first presentations, and I didn't get it at all.
So for those of you that don't know, Filter Easy is air filter subscriptions. So it's as simple as that. It's a pain to go to the store and remember what size your filters are and when to change them, when you change them last. And people have little hacks on how to do it, but this every 3-4 months they show up on your door and you know it's time to change it. And it's business is awesome. But early on, when my partner David Gardner invested, he invested around let's just say sub $1 million valuation, and they're many times that now. But what it was going and understanding value props to the customers, right? Do people actually want this? And so when David started working with the kids, they dropped out of NC State to start this business. David was asking them questions. How many times do people now currently change their air filters, right? And they're like, we're not really sure, but everybody on our system is changing them 3 or 4 times a year. So what David did is he walked into the aisle of Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever it was, and everybody that was going to pick out an air filter, they just talked to him for 2 days. When was the last time you changed your air filter? Now they have 100 people that have been in there. David was standing right with them asking these people. And they got an exclusive agreement with a group called Flanders at the time, and now it's AAF, but they're the world's largest air filter manufacturer. And they went in to pitch to Flanders for an exclusive relationship where Flanders was going to provide air filters to filter easy. And the kids sat down and they said, the first slide was, how would you like 3 times the revenue from your customers that you're getting right, same number of customers you're getting right now. And the CEO or COO said, yeah, we would like that. And they said, well, we believe that, and then the second slide was, well, we believe that your customers change their filters on average twice a year, right? And they said, yeah, that sounds right. We just commissioned a $500,000 study, and that's the result that it came back with, where they stood in aisle for Lowe's and got the same data, right? and then they said, well, we have 200 customers right now, and all of them changed their filters 4 times a year, 6 times a year, whatever it was. And they said, okay. And a few months later, there was an exclusive relationship there. So it was coachability, it was going, discovering your customers, it was, and then having, the courage to go and talk to some of these large companies.
So, are you also an investor in Carpe?
We're not, okay.
Anyone else have questions? I'm just going to start picking random people because I know Ricardo and Frank are back there. So
I
Sure.
guess so how do you view the importance of advisors associated with startups?
Yeah, this is a really, really important question. So, I would say, why are they an advisor, right? So, just because someone's a good business person or it doesn't mean they're going to be a good advisor for your company. So we look at what makes them an advisor for your company. Do they have experience in the startup space, growing and scaling companies? Do they have experience in the industry? What makes them the right person to be on your advisory board? Okay. Now, let's say that they have great industry experience and they're going to come in. Well, you want to very quickly establish a formal advisory role with that person. There's some amount of equity that it probably should be worth for that person so that they feel obligated to spend time with you and your company. And you outline what that looks like. Is it an hour a week? Is it a half day, a month? What is it that they're going to do and what they can provide to you? And then their shares, their interest in the company should vest over time. So that if the relationship isn't working out, you can say, hey, I'm not getting the value out of this that I thought I was going to, and I'm going to stop it right now. And that's the respectful way to do it. Because you want some obligation and some upside on that advisor. And if they keep pushing back and say, no, I don't need it, well, that means that they don't want to necessarily dedicate their time to you, and they don't have a vested interest in your success necessarily. So, I always like formalizing that role with the advisor, not right away, but after a few meetings, right, and set expectations up front. But advisors can be extremely impactful if you have the right ones, especially early on, making introductions and all that stuff. Be very careful, though, about advisors that say they're going to make all these introductions and change your world, and you give up a ton of equity, and then all of a sudden, their Rolodex is spent in 2 weeks, and you got 1 meeting out of it.
So David is an investor in Fortnite Brewing. Has there been any boost from the brand of the Fortnite game?
They tried to meet to collaborate on it, but for some reason, Fortnite, the game, has a little bit more power than Fortnite.
Yes, a $3 billion brand now.
So are you going to go to the UNC Innovation Summit?
I am, yeah. Tomorrow?
Yeah.
I am, yes. I will be at the UNC Innovation Summit.
The 50 companies are presenting.
I'll be over at UNC probably like 5 times over the next
2 more questions, then we gotta go. We gotta shut it down.
Tim, first of all, thanks for coming. We really appreciate you taking the time. Quickly, is there a typical way that a deal is structured and what you look for as an exit strategy and the timeline?
Sure, yeah. So we only invest, so this is co-founders, we only invest the first time in price equity rounds so that we get our equity right away. When we will, let's take a real number example. If we invest $400K on a 1.2 million pre-money valuation, that's 1.6 million post, we own 25% of the company, right? It's just simple math. So that's typically how we structure the deal. A lot of times early on, if a company you can't value a company, which, I guess I get. We go down a rabbit hole with that, but it's structured on a convertible note, which is, this is debt on the company books until amount of capital is raised, and then it'll convert into equity at that point. but we always structure it that way. And then as far as exit goes, you need to have a conversation with the entrepreneur early on as an investor as to what are their goals. Because I've talked to some companies that have said, unless we IPO this thing, it's IPO or bust. Okay, well, as an early seed stage investor, IPO or bust, okay, good luck, right? I'm going to lose my money, or I'm going to get diluted out where I own less than 0.5% of this company that I just probably put a ton of money and time into. And from a return standpoint, that doesn't do anything for me. But the right answer for an entrepreneur when an investor asks, when do you want to exit? He said, well, listen, if there's an opportunity to exit, I'm going to talk to my investors and I'm going to talk to my board. Because you always have to have that conversation, right? And there are companies we have that we can sell right now that we're saying, no, we're going to keep rolling the dice. And there are companies that we're saying, let's sell now. A wise person told me, you never know if you sold too early, you always know if you sold too late. Right? So, but it's important to have that discussion.
Yeah, last question for you, Tim.
Yeah.
Just retrospectively looking back at some of the startups that you've invested in,
Yeah.
what do you consider the success criteria to be? To look back and say, this is the criteria I look at to say this is a successful investment.
I'm going to answer it two ways. I'm going to say, here's what the trends I've seen in successful investments. Entrepreneurs are honest and open with their investors and stop selling them. Okay? So if everything's going great all the time, you're full of it, and you're still trying to sell your investors, get out of that, and they're there to help. You already have their money. Okay? The other thing is reporting, accuracy of reporting, financial reporting, focusing on the key assumptions that drive the business have led to successful entrepreneurs. It is directly correlated. If I looked at our companies right now that have gotten, the companies that have gotten their financials accurately reported to us on a cash basis every month on time, those are by far the most successful companies. The ones that don't do that are in the middle tier, and the ones that never do it are the worst. Okay? And then what I look at it for have they been successful? Listen, early stage, these business plans change. Almost none of our companies hit their goals, hit their financial goals. Like, I understand that things are going to happen in that, but it is how has the company reacted to its assumption, to the data that's coming in, and changed its assumptions accordingly to make their predictions more accurate. So we have a method that we go through every month. We look at the assumptions for that month, we look at what was realized, and then we look at how we're going to change our assumptions moving forward. And we react to that month by month by month until the variance gets so small that we're accurately predicting the company. So for success, we haven't had a ton of exits yet because we're still pretty early on for a seed stage investor. But I would say, how are the companies getting more and more accurate at projecting their business? And I define that as if they've been able to do that, they're being successful.
Okay, we're out of time, but this was fantastic.